and I, mentioned several.
This meeting is being recorded.
That is the easiest problem to solve. There's other problems as far as greenhouse gas production that are much more. It's a cultural problem. If you go and try to change the way farmers do it, you're talking about a cultural war, is what I see it, where you're talking about 300 or 400 utilities, where you're talking about millions of landowners and hundreds of thousands, maybe 1 million farmers. It's so culturally embedded in their DNA to do things one way, and it's very hard. It's hard for people to understand what a big impact it is, and to change it is going to be more difficult than electrifying like cars and the electric utility industry.
Yeah, and the argumentation, of course, has been that with food and agriculture on par with the electric system or the power generation system, the energy system, from its impact on the environment. I mean, 1/3 of global emissions are contributed to the way we grow and raise our food, And so to change the system as it becomes aware, exactly as you're saying, it's as impactful, it's as disruptive to the food system as the energy sector is being disrupted. It's just that we have been talking about the energy sector for so many years already that people are more in line with that, but with food is coming on fast and hard. Stacy, do you want to? What are you impressed? Do you want to use your words to?
Yeah, I'll use my words because usually I'm shy to use them. But one of the things that I've been wanting to say is, so when I come to these calls, what always confuses me is I'm not sure of what the specific goal is action-wise. And one of the things that would really be helpful to me is, so the information is there, but I feel like there's separate goals. Like I see it separate as a need to put it together, separate as the people that are going to communicate it, separate the people that are going to engage. And it would be helpful, like when we talk about, like sometimes I'm not sure, are we talking about putting together a toolkit that's going to be used, or are we talking about actually doing things in different places? And I wish that we could just maybe look at specific goals and then be able to see where the goals overlap. I don't know if that's making sense, but let me just go on for another minute. It's all the information's out there, but from my perspective, there's a need to put it together where we're taking it from different silos and connecting it so that we can see the whole system before we can bring it to people that don't really see that whole picture. So for example, on Facebook, I just decided somebody was putting something, they were just putting down the whole idea of electric vehicles, just blanket statement. And I was like, all right, I know this person, I have to say a little something. So I just kind of asked a question to kind of make them think, are you just against progress in general? Like, what is it? And, somebody finally, of course, they didn't really take me seriously, but they were still being polite. And somebody started talking about lithium mines. Now, honestly, I don't know enough about it. And I just kept talking about, well, that's what research is for. And I went and I looked it up and I saw that, now there's a way that they may be able to not use lithium. Again, these are things that I personally don't know. I want to educate myself, but when I come to a lot of these calls, it's overwhelming. I don't even know where to start. So I wish that even within a call like this, it could be divided into segments. And does that make sense, what I'm saying? Or not really?
It makes sense to me, but I would love to hear someone else respond to it. Sunil, what are your thoughts?
I agree with what Stacy is saying, but the only one disclaimer that I think we should start with is that figure out when is the time that we actually start getting into specifics. Because like Stacy is saying, I mean, everyone is at a different level in terms of understanding of the domain itself and what the problems are. Everyone is at a different level of understanding about what needs to be done. Everyone is at a different level of understanding of what they themselves can contribute to any effort that comes out. So while I agree, I mean, I agree 100% with Stacy, but my sense is that today, I think, is the third call, right, Klaus?
Yeah.
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 And
I
yeah,
think
this is the
fourth,
third call.
Yeah.
Is it the fourth one?
I
I
think
thought
so.
I'd been
Yeah.
there also. Okay. Yeah, okay, yes, it is the fourth call. Yeah, right. And we, last time's call, we actually jumped into trying to do a toolkit and then we actually backed off. So I think it's narrowing down and becoming more and more clear about what the challenges are. It's not as easy as probably any of us thought when we started coming into these calls. But my response is that fortunately, all the people that I've heard on the call, everyone who's come on the call is not coming with an agenda to say that, okay, let me jump into this call, and if I can do something and make some money out of it or make a business out of it, let me go ahead and do that. So I think that's a very positive. These days, I tell a lot of people that, it's important to pause, although things are urgent, right? If I heard this guy, there's a guy called Ako Malafe, I think. He's a Nigerian who settled it out of India. And I loved what he said. The times are urgent, let us slow down. Right? And I think that is my biggest takeaway, that yes, let's keep going on with these calls, and I'm glad Stacey's put a stake in the ground to say, okay, somewhere down the line, we need to start getting a direction, and each one of us needs to start figuring out how much can we bite off, right, to be able to contribute. And the other thing I probably want to think of is that, Klaus, I think when we started, it was more about, can we figure out a design process for communication? And so one of the things I think we could do maybe in today's call itself is to pick the first set of, or the bullseye audience. Is it the consumers who go to the supermarket shelves? Are they the people that we're looking to talk to? Is it the farmers, or is it the institutions? Who are we actually trying to start with? It's not a question of, can we do all of them together? Probably not this group at least, right? But maybe what we could try to do is to see if we can come to an understanding about which might be the bullseye target that we should be keeping as a focus when we come into the next few calls. So then it might become a little sharper from everyone's perspective. And that's about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that gives us, it's a lot to digest here. I would love to hear from Eric. What are your thoughts? What are your impressions?
Okay, I'm here for my personal education as well as to get ideas for how to communicate in my local community. So that's primary, but I was confused on our second call because it looked like we were working on a marketing strategy and I wasn't sure what that was or where it was going and whether I'd want to be a part of that. But then last week it was a little different. So, I mean, as I learn, I want to read something from a utility bill that I got. The comforts of everyday life are powered by Pico. That's Philadelphia Electric. Okay, so the click of the stove, the pitter-patter of a hot shower, it's what makes a home comfortable. All day, every day, Pico is committed to making sure customers enjoy that comfort safely by investing in and upgrading our natural gas systems. Our customers might not be able to see us, but they can feel Pico's energy each and every day. Part of every home and part of the community. That's Pico's commitment to every customer's safety and ease. That's comfort powered by Pico Natural Gas. So my question is, how how does natural gas fit in to fossil fuels? Like, is it a major component of the problem or a minor component? So that's one question. And then, are we addicted to comfort? And what are we trying to do? Yeah. So
Yeah.
welcome any feedback.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to food, we definitely are addicted to comfort. Now, that's, I mean, we want it to be available everywhere and, at a moment's notice. We go to the grocery store and we want to see, our products on the shelf. And we don't really think much about where these products come from and who prepared them. I was looking up kosher food, because my daughter married a Jewish boy and they're into this kosher and it's like confusing as hell. And I thought, I mean, because the rabbi is putting them into this conservative mode, right? So they have to have two different sets of china and glassware and silverware. I can't figure out which fork to use for what. And but anyway, so I thought, so what really is this? And I got into a conversation with a member of the Jewish People for Peace, Jewish or something like this, an organization. And she had this wonderful description of said, you should know who has grown your food. Have the animals been treated humanely? Have the workers been paid well? Has the entire way of this food from being grown to reaching you been blessed by integrity and honesty and so on? And I thought that was a wonderful way, of looking at food. Yeah, it does require slaughtering of meat, but it requires a certain way of slaughtering. I mean, it's, of course, they eat meat, but they want to have the animal treated humanely. So a Jewish person shouldn't be buying food that comes out of a concentrated animal holding facility, right? That's if you are kosher, if you're thinking in terms of kosher. And I think it's this consciousness, of food connecting to the land and to the people who work the land. That's not in our mindset. So that would be one way to achieve people to just be aware, right? I mean, to just be aware of the impact food has on water, on soil, and on the people who are working it, because there's some horrible working conditions in the food system, in the food factories and slaughterhouses and so on. Yeah, so I mean, with Gene and I, it's like let's do a chart here and develop a map. When we put out this first map there, you realize how overwhelming this whole system really is. I mean, where do you start and what kind of a stake you put into the ground? And just like Eric, Stacy, I'm right now trying to connect within my community and work with NGOs and but also finally made contact with the chief conservationist of Deschutes County, so the general manager for the Soil and Water Conservation District in Deschutes County is now engaged, and we have started a conversation. Because the challenge really is that you have on the federal government side a lot of activism taking place, because I'm working with NGOs who are trying to influence the legislative process. There are hearings at the House and in the Senate for the agricultural committees, and there's a lot of plans rolling out. But the challenge is, how do you get this down to the community level so people dial in your community to first of all be aware of there are billions of dollars being made available for conservation practices. Well, what does that all mean, and how do you dial in, and so on? So that could be one entry point, right? But that's different for everyone. Yeah, Stacey.
part of my frustration, and this is what I'm trying to say, is that we're so polarized that because we don't have the simple bits of information, there's no way to even change the dialogue, because it's like, no, this is bad. And people like me, like I can't really engage on the level I'd like to move the conversation along, because I don't have enough. So for me to do all the research, it's too much for one person, you know? So if we could just, you know, I love having these conversations. I'd like to have more, like I would like to take one call. Like I want to know more about different ways to add carbon to the soil, just separately. So I could just look there. I mean, I feel bad. I feel like I'm almost asking to be spoon fed, but yes, I need to be spoon fed to feed the others.
Yeah, no, I mean, Jerry has his brain, right, to consolidate data points and where you can sneak through and find answers to questions. You know, Jean and I have talked about how can we create a depository that's organized in a way so you can find an answer to these questions, because there's, I mean, everything you can think of is there, right? There's the Soil Health Institute, which has, you know, a phenomenal website to explain how soil functions and how it can be restored and so on. I mean, and there are some really simple principles of there are like 5 core principles of converting, you know, dead soil back to life and restore carbon into the soil. But you know, and so, but what I hear, Stacey, is that you want to create a ladder, you know, for people to climb up into what do I really need to know to understand how to respond to this. But then also, if we look at ourselves as interpreters, right, or as connecting to people who don't have the time for whatever reason, or the capacity to engage with all this, how can you make like a couple succinct points that bring attention to that person about changing and adapting their consumption patterns? So that's sort of what we were trying to do is, you know, how can we communicate with people that brings awareness without intimidation and in a constructive way. And yeah, so that's a challenge.
I guess my mind goes to where it usually goes, which is how do we get people to ask these questions for themselves?
Yeah.
So an interesting post by Jean this morning that I saw on Systems Wiki, which said, "Stop this insanity." And I loved the title. I quickly ran through it. And what jumped out at me was the last paragraph, actually. You're the only person who can change your mind, so I shouldn't be so foolish as to try. The best I can possibly hope for is to provoke thought, which is rather difficult to do if you become defensive. And that then drew me to what he's written in the last line, probably, which is the explanation of stealth modeling. And if I were to stitch Stacey's thought with stealth modeling, probably, and maybe also bring in, okay, now this is a spanner in the works. You know, AI is pretty advanced. Simple AI is pretty advanced these days. So you could actually ask Siri a question, right? Which takes care completely of the capacity problem. If we could have a version of any of these bots, not the stupid chat bots, but something as intelligent as Alexa or Siri, and just feed it all the questions, all the answers, all the depositories, rather than for us to try and do the heavy lifting. Why don't we just think of putting an AI engine on top of it? I mean, you can speak to, I can try and reach out to some of these guys out here in India, but I think India is more a heavy lifting kind of workforce than the guys that will actually stitch these two together. But that's a thought, you know, that way our capacity doesn't get we are not hard pressed for capacity, like Klaus, like you pointed out, it could be anything. It may be just a priority issue, maybe a capacity issue. And the last thing you want is that people start asking questions and we say, hey, you know what, we don't know who you can go to. And so if you were to hand it over to an AI bot kind of a thing, it could make a lot of sense. And I love the idea of asking questions rather than, here's what I think we should be telling these guys. And I don't think it's going to make any difference to somebody who's already made up his mind that he doesn't want to listen.
Yeah. Gene, you have been very quiet.
Yeah, Gene, can you enlighten us on this post, which I really love? Thank you very much for your post. I shared it on LinkedIn. Stop this insanity.
I'm not sure I'm in a position to enlighten anyone. I'm still looking for a good question. So isn't Stacy's advantage being inquisitive, being willing to say, I don't know, and go look for an answer, to be able to respond to someone, as opposed to the typical responses that happen on LinkedIn come from people who have decided they already know what the answer is. Right? And I said, I've commented several times that I begin every day with the assumption that everything I currently believe could be wrong. Right? So every day is full of ahas about, about my own ignorance. It just amazes me. And so the video that was the basis for that post was one that Klaus sent me, okay? And I told him this morning that I think I've listened to it 5 or 6 times, and if I listen to it another dozen times, I might actually get it. So I don't know what the answer is. So I continue, in other words, I've commented that I spent 40 years being part of the problem because I did exactly the opposite of what the video said. I would work on these models endlessly, and then I would inflict them on other people and never give them a way to actually understand what I thought I understood. And then I finally made that connection to the utility of storytelling, so that if I unfold one of my models and allow someone to actually have a chance of comprehending what I think I understand, to the point where when it's finished, they can make comments in terms of things that I missed. So that it's an ongoing quest to evolve our understanding beyond wherever it is. And, you know, the distribution of people are, I think, are very different. I read Crossing the Chasm by Jeffrey Moore, I think it was. And I have experienced what he described on an ongoing basis, so that there are those people who are on the bleeding edge of things, and they're always looking to understand the next new thing. And then they're the early adopters, and then the late adopters, and the people that will never adopt. And it makes no sense trying to convince the people that will never adopt. You can, you know, the wonderful thing about beating your head against the wall is how good it feels when you stop. So you figure out which people you can connect with in terms of asking, well, saying, you know, I've been reading a lot of this stuff about climate change, and I get all these people that are on both sides of the argument, and I don't know what to believe. Do you have a sense of how I figure this out? I mean, I try to ask open questions so that I don't actually lead them in one direction or the other. So that, I mean, what is the typical response if I discount you? The way that I phrase that more often than not is how much of what I have to offer are you willing to listen to right after I tell you you're stupid? I have to figure out how to avoid that. And I'm not nearly as good at that as I would like to be. Though I have 3 or 4 Zoom calls a day with people that are helping me work on it. Did I answer your question? What was the question?
Yeah. Because I mean, to get the interest, right, for someone to wanting to ask questions, people have a really emotional connection to food, and particularly when you look at the way that the industry is coming out with enhancements, with vitamins, with power drinks, with probiotics now, and so on. So there is this massive confusion about, how do I interact with food? And the simplification would be, healthy food comes from healthy soil, and everything else in between is chemicals and processing and so on that has unproven impacts on you. And you're basically a big experiment here. But that's really hard to do because people get into. I mean, I have a colleague who every morning had a fistful of pills that he was taking, different vitamins and all this stuff. And I'm going, this can't be good. This is all chemical, artificial stuff. And if you take it every day, it accumulates in your system. But no, he wants to do it, and he's not very healthy, but he just believes that this is helpful. So it's very hard to break through those barriers. The difficulty right now really is that you have farmers on the one hand who are becoming very alert to I'm in trouble. I'm losing my soil. Water is becoming very sporadic, unreliable, and so on and so on. So I really ought to change. And there are the most basic things to do when you want to restore your soil is to put a cover crop on it. Now, there should always be a living root in the soil on a year-round basis. And the American farmer basically pulls one crop out of it, and the rest of the time the soil lays there open. And then you need to rotate crops because each crop takes different nutrients out of the soil. So if you put the same crop in over and over, it depletes the soil, it kills the soil microbiome. You end up with sand. So those are the two most basic. Then you shouldn't till, because the moment you break open, it's like breaking open your skin. The living cover protects the carbon inside the soil, protects the life inside the soil. So you rip it open with a plow, and the carbon steams out, and life dies inside the soil. So those are the most basic things. But the way that the American food system has been constituted, we have so much land under cultivation for corn, it's the size of California. And this corn is being turned into high fructose corn syrup, into animal feed, into biofuel, into all, and only like 10% is actually consumed by people. So you have, the problems are so overwhelming now you just really don't know where to start. But it has to start. You have to start with the consumer to be educated about the impact of knowing where my food comes from and how it has been produced, and how the life inside the soil constitutes the quality of the crop that's coming out of that soil, which then impacts my own gut microbiome, my own health. So even explaining this, right? It's so complex, and there's just so many moving parts.
Though, Klaus, if you try to explain it to somebody that doesn't want to hear it, you're wasting your time.
Yeah.
So
That's
just-
one point, and sorry, can I just, sorry to
Sure.
interrupt, but the other thing is, even if they do get this information, even if there's somebody that's neutral, what is the power they have to be able to do anything? What choices can they make? So it's a very long drawn out process. Then they need to do something else and lobby and things like that, right? So it's quite a task. I mean, if I were to just visualize that, if I were to actually get successful in telling the consumer that this is the way it is, and the consumer wanted to demand it, how would the supply chain actually work? How would he or she actually get it on the supermarket store?
Yeah, you would have to get the industry to decentralize their supply chain. And that's a big task. But when you look at Walmart and Kroger, I mean, here in Bend, we have beautiful fresh produce during the summer, heirloom tomatoes, and you go to Albertson and to Safeway and to Walmart, and they're importing tomatoes from Mexico. Now, and then you go, I mean, how is the local farmer doesn't have a market, and actually product goes to waste here because they can't, they have this big crop coming up and there's no market to sell into. So it's without the cooperation of this centralized food supply chain, not much can change. So how do you convince companies, to support local farmers? I've had a conversation this week. Someone from the Sierra Club contacted me, and they're saying there is this initiative in my town where the local water utility wants to pay farmers upstream to reduce the nitrogen outflow. And I'm thinking, why would a city, because otherwise they have to upgrade their filtration systems to remove nitrogen from the water. And then you go, why would you force cities and communities to spend millions of dollars to upgrade their water filtration systems if you just tell the farmers to stop using this nitrogen as liberally as they are doing it? Florida, I mean, a huge example, right? Because Florida, the coastlines of Florida are getting devastated with nitrogen runoff from the agricultural fields. But people don't make that linkage.
Though I believe that my nitrogen usage is responsible for my crop yield. So don't mess with my pocketbook, okay? So, I mean, convincing them from a logical perspective simply isn't likely to work. I mean, I think I commented last week about the number of Gabe Brown videos I've watched on YouTube. He's a farmer in South Dakota who goes around and he tells his story about taking over this farm, and the first year he got hailed out and the crop was completely destroyed. The next year he got hailed out again and it was completely destroyed. And then they had a drought the next year and he had nothing. And the bank wasn't going to loan him any more money. And he said, I refused to give up, so I had to understand what the hell it was I was doing wrong. And he explains to farmers, and he spends all of his time going around talking to farmers and acquainting them with his story and what he learned, as opposed to telling them what they got to do. And he positions it from the perspective of, it will cost you less to actually prep the field. It will cost you less for fertilizers. It will produce the same or better yield. You want more money, or do you want to go out of business? I mean, it's emotional and it's logical at the same time. And he has a basis for doing this because it's his own personal experience, as opposed to me going and trying to share what I understand with some farmer who says, who the hell are you? Go away. Right? Though, to Stacey's point about where do you find the stuff, and the idea that it's all out there. I mean, the problem is there's just too much of it out there. You know, you ask a question and
That's
people
true.
say, go read these 5 papers. And my
Right.
response is, well, I'd really love to read these 5 papers. Could you sort of give me a summary of what parts of them you think is really meaningful here? Because I ain't got time to go read 100 pages to figure out the answer to what I was trying to understand. You know, I mean, it's good to be considerate of other people's time, so that, you know, people, the ones that post links or do posts on LinkedIn and they say, you got to read this, but they don't even give me the link for it. Okay. Then you got to go look for where the hell it is. So you ask them, do you have a link for this? And then you look at it and you find out it's 42 pages long and you say, well, this looks really interesting. Could you sort of give me a sense of what parts of it you thought were really meaningful and relevant to the conversation? I can't find time to read it.
See, I'm trying to convince the Sierra Club to forget about moving the Earth out of its axle and just start doing something that's practical, simple, doable. If we had a Meatless Monday promotion,
Wait, stop, Klaus, stop. Here we go. Here's this convince again, okay? You're on the same path. It's not going to get you to an answer.
you know,
I'm trying to, I got to convince them, okay? You can't. You need to do something, figure out what it is that's important to them and figure out how to help them get there or evolve their understanding, as opposed to, the problem is I'm currently doing the exact thing I'm telling you not to do, all right? This really sucks. It's a catch-22 that it's almost impossible to get out of. And I fall in this trap all the time. And then I go kick myself in the butt because I know that I shouldn't do this. All right. So
No, it's okay. You should do this once in a while. It's important to remind the others, because each of us still starts falling into the same trap, right? It's just habit. I just posted an image. You could look at that image. It's actually, it says it all, right?
yeah. I mean, the challenge is that to accept the idea that to eat one less burger a week, right, needs to be linked to the you know, look at the quality of the meat we're eating. Can we just take the pressure off now and do something that's you can handle, right? I mean, you can handle eating one less burger a week, or you know, eat a plant-based meal. Oh, Sunil, please go. What do you mean?
No,
My hand is up.
You wrote my hand is up.
No, I said I'm responding to what Eric is saying. Who wants to join the Society for Prevention of Design? If you read on the chat, right?
Yeah.
So I was just putting my hand up. Yeah, I would like to join.
Yeah, to get this intuitive understanding. I mean, I've tried to get people disgusted, you know, with some of the foods that is coming to our table by explaining how horrible it is, the way it is put together and the damage it does. Now, but then you're trying to say, look, the benefits of eating a plant-forward meal, you know, with produce that's coming from your local farm, the health impact of that, and so on. So to do a positive messaging, but I'm not a great messenger, I don't think. So I mean, you know, my thing is my mind goes into so many technical details that I get lost.
Just to shift back for a minute, I'm wondering if it would be useful, like you bring up the corn example, and I'm wondering if it would be useful to just describe, like, okay, from the point of view of the people that have the most to lose, to be able to look and see how they can be protected, how if their behavior were to be shifted in a way where they're still protected, and how that would impact all the other things that are impacted, but follow it through. Because I mean, if you just stop production, now you don't have money, now you don't have food to feed the produce. You know, I mean, it's going to lead to other things, and it doesn't seem like we follow through before we enact things. So I'm just wondering if it's even worth it to take a look of what would it look like if we did this, and then at each step, how could we mitigate the negative consequences and see if we make it all the way back so that we're all happy.
Yeah,
I guess just listening to what Jean has been trying to say again and again is that, you know, do we keep telling people and expect that logic will work with them? Probably not. I read a book many years ago, a book called Biology. I don't know if you've heard of this book. It's BUYOLOGY. And I've pasted a link to one of the excerpts in that. And it's very fascinating. This guy, Martin Lindstrom, has written about all the communication that went regarding smoking cigarettes, right? And logically, everything that everyone was talking about said that cigarettes were bad for health. And you also had regulation to say that, you know, you should not be smoking, and they tried to clamp down hard on cigarette companies. But to Jean's point, basically people do not, I mean, they understand logically, but they act emotionally. So even if we were to come up with a fascinating or a absolutely logical, and, you know, we'd be actually breaking our heads saying, you know, we did so much of work and we put in so much effort, we collaborated and created this communication. Why the hell isn't it working? It's not working because, you know, it doesn't appeal to the emotional. I mean, emotion is on both sides. It's a positive emotion as well as a negative emotion. So a lot of people, when they try to communicate to the emotion of people, they try to use the negative one, which is more towards fear, right? And
right.
I think what we should be doing is actually quite the opposite. And then what we could try to do is to say that you tell us what you want, and let's see if we can give you all the wherewithal for you to try out things on your own, right? Otherwise, we probably will create great communication. We'd be very satisfied that we actually solved the problem, but the problem will still fester the way it is right now.
Yeah,
Because like Jean says, you know, all this information exists, right? And there's lots of narratives coming about it, and people are confused. But at the end of it, I think even the negative or the positive narrative is too far removed from an individual's emotional connect about the food on his table or her table. And so it's not making the connect at all. That's my view.
yeah. Stacy, you had your hand up, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to clarify something. When I talk about, you know, drawing a picture of what it looks like on all sides, it's not to convince, but it's to create windows on all around the whole issue so that people could see which window they want to look in, because everybody's interested in something else. So to somebody, they might say, oh, I didn't even realize this related to animal farming. Oh, I didn't well, this relates to the pocketbook. Oh, this relates to the soil. They can see for themselves where they might be drawn to care. So that's really what I'm talking about, not to convince anybody.
Yeah. Hi, Stacy. Ul, thank you for joining us here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we are just discussing how do you get traction, right? I mean, it's sort of the main point. How can you get traction with people? So New York City has an interesting experiment going, and it's quite successful. So they are working with mothers, you know, with kids in school, to explain the impact of proper nutrition on the ability to learn, proper development of the brain, mental acuity, and so on. And so they started a meatless Monday and a vegetarian Friday, and they're expanding it, and the kids are going for it. And it has been communicated in ways that are very positive and made fun now. So, but it takes an amazing amount of structured communication, to reach a particular target audience, to then respond to this. And I think that's what we set out to do with this craft that Gene developed there, of how do you group people by segments and then develop communication points that relate to their specific context, to their specific experiences. And I think just thinking about it in generic terms will help us to step back and communicate in a more efficient way.
Could we develop a set of questions and test them on an unsuspecting audience and find out how they respond to the questions?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I mean, it would give you an insight where that person stands, right?
Right? So that you could decide whether or not you ought to really attempt to engage in a conversation with this person, or say, no, I'm wasting my time. Let me go find somebody else that might at least be on the fence.
Or tailor what you're talking about based on where the person is.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I disrupt and show a 2-minute video
Please
that
do.
I found on the internet? Can I share my screen? Yes, I think I can.
You can, yeah.
Make sure to click the audio check off.
Yeah.
Where is that?
So, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you hear it?
No. There's an
Can you
audio.
hear?
You have to click share audio when you share. So try stop sharing and share it again with share audio.
Okay, let me try that. New share, stop video.
Look in the lower left for a share audio button.
Yeah, okay, cool, got it. Thanks, Eric. Can you hear me?
No, yeah, we can hear you, but the
Okay,
video
can you
is
see my
paused.
screen?
We can see the screen.
Yeah, you have to start the video playing.
Okay, let me start the video, yeah.
And just puts them empty as they are on posters.
Can you hear the video now?
And
Yeah,
other
but
people go
I
and
think
fill
it's
them in.
quite a ways along. I think you need to rewind it to the
This
beginning.
one says, please
No,
let
I'm
me
just
die
showing
in
a
peace.
small clip.
Oh,
I think that was the most surprising to myself, was that the writing was actually so good. This is on a musician poster that says, I am concerned that my CD will not sell more than 200,000 units, and that as a result, my recoupable advance from my label will be taken from me, after which my contract will be cancelled, and I'll be back doing journey covers on Bleecker Street.
So let me just go back a little bit so you get the
And that, as a
gist of
result,
what
my
you're doing.
recoupable advance
sec.
from my O and fill them in. I would definitely say that observing Vic Muniz' cloud a couple of years ago in Manhattan for sure made me happy as well. And then, but my last project is again from a young designer from in New York. He's from Korea originally, and he took it upon himself to print 55,000 speech bubbles, empty speech bubbles, stickers, large ones and small ones, and he goes around New York and just puts them, empty as they are, on posters. And other people go and fill them in. This one says, "Please let me die in peace." I think that was the most surprising to myself, was that the writing was actually so good. This is on a musician poster that says, "I am concerned that my CD will not sell more than 200,000 units, and that, as a result, my recoupable advance from my label will be taken from me, after which my contract will be cancelled, and I'll be back doing journey covers on Bleecker Street." I think the reason this works so well is because everybody involved wins. G gets to have his project, the public gets a sweeter environment, and different public gets a place to express themselves, and the advertisers finally get somebody to look at their ads.
Yeah, that's it basically. So I think you get the idea.
Which idea is that?
Basically, what this guy did was, he said, instead of his creating communication, he's a graphic designer, this Korean guy this guy talked about. And this guy printed about, in different sizes, these empty speech
Okay.
bubbles, which were stickers. And he just put them out there. So maybe, you know, I mean, just a way to trigger engagement, basically. So yeah, go ahead, Stacy.
So, okay, because I see where you're going this. So what about if we tried an experiment just with our own groups of people? And what about if we tried to figure out how, just with the people in, let's say, OGM or some of the other groups, we came up with a way to limit our own consumption in a way that was fun and felt connecting in some way?
Yeah.
That's another good idea.
Yeah, there's a lot of interest within OGM, you know, as you can see on the conversations going back and forth in the thread. Yeah.
What about something simple? Like, again, because let's say you just had a team of 6. You came up with teams of 6. And between the 6 of you, you had to limit by a certain amount, or you had like a scavenger hunt, 6 activities that had to be done. And so if one person does one and the other person does another, just to get through that week, almost like a competition, something fun.
I'm up for it.
I'll throw that back to Sunil. I'll help with that.
Yeah, so I think, you know, if we can start collecting these ideas, and I like the idea that we can seed these in different groups and see if they succeed, right? Instead of us telling people. So like Stacy says, you know, if we can create a sort of a contest or a competition, which we are also a part of. But the thing is that then means that we need to gamify it a little bit, because if it's a competition, then people want to know that they're winning. Only then are they going to engage, or they're going to start participating in it. So, for example, there was I think it was a UN initiative. I'll see if I can pull it up. I'll circulate it in the OGM or on this group, where they said you would earn some brownie points for everything that you did. For example, did I switch off my lights for 1 hour extra. And I could actually go there and say, well, I've done that today, and they would give me brownie points for it. And then I would keep accumulating these points. Of course, because it was a UN thing, it was more about feel good and community and stuff like that, rather than for you to be able to encash those points in terms of money, which is fine. I mean, it's not that you need to pay people to participate in these contests, but then people love contests where they can, one is that they get engagement, and second is that they get that feeling that they're doing something which is meaningful, and they're ahead of the curve, ahead of the pack, basically.
Well, my thought is in just creating it, we'd have to come up with what those tasks would be.
Right.
And and that alone is doing something.
Yes, yes, agreed.
Yeah. Stacy Hall, can you just we started out by asking what's your take on all the communication about food system that we have been bouncing around with? What's your take? Where are you positioned here?
So for me, I think I appreciate all of these suggestions. I think that Stacy Druss has a really good idea, and Surreal with the gamification and creating this like engaging two-way communication. And here, so I am in the San Francisco Bay Area, and here in Yolo, up in Yolo County, where there's a lot of farmers in that area, they're trying to create a coalition amongst all of the nonprofits that are set up around the food system. And so they've been doing like individually, they've all been doing their own things, but they have these meetings once a month where they try to create community action. And I think going from a community level is a great way to go. And so like, if you can find, for me, like when I go into a community, I like to find the people who are already wanting change, right? So like if I go in a farming community, most farmers are just not interested in changing, but there's always one guy. I call him the guy because 99% of farmers are men. So there's usually one guy that's like, I'm doing these different things. And if you can connect with that one guy, everybody else will watch what that one guy is doing. And if you can be successful with the one guy, then everybody else starts coming to you and saying, hey, they go to Joe first and they're like, hey, Joe, what you doing? I see you're doing something different. I'd like to learn about that. And so you kind of create that community around the one person who's ready to lead. And then, I don't know if it would something like more community oriented and centralized. So like for farmers, I'm thinking of soil health groups, because it's the one thing that underlies the success of all farmers. And farmers like to think of themselves as like individuals. So if we can create something like that on the consumer side, that like nutrition health, or like they're doing in New York City, going after child health. And that's again, something that they're doing here in Yolo County, is they are going after the young people first. So they're very focused on connecting. First, they're focused on getting the schools all their own individual school farms. And then they're looking to connect the school farms to community engagement programs where you can cross over from children to the families that the children are a part of. And then they're looking to connect community groups like the local food banks, local restaurants, and things like that to like make connections for distribution and to enhance the conversation. So for me, I think that looking at it from like that interconnected place and finding the intersections where people can act and giving people opportunities to act in those intersections could be really empowering, because people are very overwhelmed as they don't know what to do. And so they feel really helpless. So I think if we can give them some places like Stacy Joss was saying, those windows, right? Those intersection points, that's where those windows should be. So people can look around and see, oh, this connects to this, this, and this. And they can go down a rabbit hole. And we can create systems like online, hopefully, that can reinforce those those in-person touch points. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I really like this. Actually, if I could suggest, to focus on community engagement, there are some amazing examples around the country with, I mean, San Francisco, Oakland is way out there, New York. I mean, there are a lot of communities that are very active already, and they are great ideas. But if you were to start in your community, who would you call on? I mean, what comes to mind where you could engage? What group would you join, right? And make a difference. Yeah, Eric, I like the idea of curation of what works. Absolutely, because you don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are so many great, like Stacy was just mentioning, there are really some great examples out there. But then, like I mean, even in my own community, Bend, it's so progressive on so many levels, but then they're not, because it's not really firing on all cylinders. There are a lot of gaps where they could improve. Yeah, we're at the hour here. Shall we focus on community? Would that be a good way to go? Sunil, what do you think?
Yes, I think so. Community and engagement, I think. And I think it'll all bubble up. I'm reasonably sure that once we start seeding what we are talking about, we shouldn't do anything more than seeding the idea.
Yeah.
Everything else should be done by the community, and we can be there for hand-holding wherever it's needed and wherever we can help, actually.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin Jones is big time into community building, and I know there is an interest in other groups to do the same. Well, you're all connected to the OGM mail thread, right? Sunil, you're in on that?
Yes.
So,
absolutely.
maybe we can just continue this conversation during the week, exchanging some files. So let me think how I can kick off some ideas about community food systems, community engagement, because that's really where the challenge is. There is the whole idea of regeneration, the natural world, is strictly local, strictly community based. There is nothing that a multinational company can do in Bend, Oregon, that would make an impact. It really has to start from the bottom on up.
Yes, I think the whole point about decentralization actually is the most powerful idea here. And so
I
small
agree.
communities, yeah.
Okay.
I
Shall
think
we do that?
Yes, it just went over time on the clock. So
Yeah.
anyway.
Well, thank you for hanging in and continuing to talk. We'll figure this thing out somehow.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye,
Have a good week.
Stacey. Bye, Stacey again. Second
Bye.
Stacey. Bye.